Hi, Yarrow Kubrin, Keller Williams Realty. So about 35% of my business is commercial. And what I'm going to talk to you about is an environmental study. So there are different types of environmental studies. And typically they're called a phase 1, a phase 2, or a phase 3. Phase 1 is less in-depth than a phase 2, and a phase 2 is less in-depth than a phase 3. What a phase 1, 2, or 3 environmental study of a property will do is it will evaluate the condition of that property, and it will also give the new potential owner or the seller an understanding of the history of the usages of that property. So let me give you two examples, because you may be thinking, well, why would I do that and why is that important to me? Say you're buying a piece of property and say it's a business and it's in downtown. Well, it might be valuable for you to know that that property used to be a gas station. It might be valuable for you to know if it was some type of industrial or light commercial activity that may have created soil contamination. Or are there underground tanks that we need to look out for? Or were those underground tanks filled in X number of years ago, but should we at least be aware of them in case we want to add a basement to that building? So an environmental study gives you the history of usages and also looks especially for environmental contaminants, which can be incredibly expensive to remediate. Another reason why it might be important is say you're buying a property and next door there used to be an auto body shop. Well, you're not buying the property next door, but it would be good to know that there was an auto body shop next door for 20 years and that they used to just spray lead paint onto the ground, and it could have leached over into your property. Let me give you another example of why an environmental study might be important. Say you're buying a piece of rural property and 100 years ago it was right next to the railroad tracks, and maybe it used to be a cannery or a processing of fruit was done on that property. Those would be good things to know because those can create contaminants and pollutants. So in West Sonoma County, where I live, it's not uncommon for people to contact me and say, I want to do an organic permaculture. Agriculture is very popular around here, and gardening, this is the birthplace of Luther Burbank and agriculture, and so a lot of people have that vision of wanting to sort of get back to the earth or be more self-sustaining or just create a better quality of food that they're ingesting themselves and feeding their family. So if you wanted to do an organic permaculture on a piece of land, it might be really valuable for you to know if in fact it had been a processing plant or tannery 80 years ago, and whether that might have created some contamination in the soils or the surrounds. Or if it was right next to the old train tracks, what type of pollutants may have been created 80 years ago before we had any sort of environmental concerns. Furthermore, if you're dealing with a realtor who doesn't know what a phase 1 environmental is, get rid of that person. It's important to understand that the license that we get in order to represent buyers and sellers in real estate is really the beginning of our training. And when you are hiring or evaluating who's going to help you to complete a transaction, it's important that you're picking people whose relevant on-the-job skills and training and experience is something that's going to bring value to your transaction. If you're thinking about buying an old dairy farm and you know that, for example, they may have had fuel tanks that they stored on that property back in the day, filling up their John Deere or their other agricultural equipment. If your agent doesn't know that a phase 1 environmental is probably a prudent use of your due diligent dollars, you may want to consider who you're hiring to represent you, because it takes a very different skill set and knowledge base to deal with that type of property transaction than to drive in a little subdivision and point out the nice tile roof and the travertine in the bathroom floor. Thanks.